Hello everyone and welcome to the first in a series of talks that I'm going to be doing with key people across our industry. Today I'm joined by Clive Sandham from Leeds Building Society, Robin Brennan from Virgin Money, we've got Andy Dean from Nationwide and Rachel from Skipton. Hello everyone.
Hello John. Hello.
As we are all aware, the last 6 weeks have been challenging in the mortgage market. So I want to open with a question to you all. How would you sum up the last 6 weeks? And as lenders, have you still got the appetite to lend that you did pre-mini budget? Clive, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, thanks, John. Yeah, it's been very interesting, hasn't it, to say the least. I think, obviously, we've been in an environment of global rising interest rates for some time now, but then along came the mini budget, which sort of put fuel on the fire, and everything went a bit mad for a few weeks, and interest rates rose about 1% in a week, which caused a lot of panic. A lot of rates got pulled because obviously we all had rates out there that suddenly became unprofitable. Some people pulled out the market altogether and wanted to sort of reassess the situation because none of us really knew what was around the corner. Luckily, since then, there's been a degree of calm come back to the markets. We've seen swap rates stabilise and indeed interest rates and mortgages slightly coming down by some lenders. And that's because, your final point, there's still a lot of competition in the market. The difference between now and, say, 2007 is that all lenders have got money to lend, and builders are very well capitalised, so the market is still strong, but I think we still don't know what's happening with interest rates, so there's a lot of uncertainty amongst consumers, so still difficult times.
Cool. Robin, anything you can add from your thoughts?
Not a huge amount. He's covered that pretty well, hasn't he? I think the only thing to say is that obviously since the mini budget, we've had some changes politically, haven't we? And with Jeremy Hunt coming in and with Rishi coming in, that has, it seems, helped us kind of stabilise that market and help us get to a slightly better position now with rates back to kind of where they were just before the mini budget hit. But
Okay.
Otherwise, completely agree with.
Cool. Rachel?
Yeah, I think to just pick up on your point around appetite to lend, I think it's really important for our whole industry to remember that lenders do absolutely have an appetite to lend. We've been working through a difficult market. We've been and absolutely empathise with brokers in that as much as our side as well. But there definitely is a commitment to lend from lenders, and I'm seeing that. I'm not speaking on behalf of us all, but we definitely see that from a Skipton perspective.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo all of what has been said, and actually just picking up on the point that Clive has made. You know, this year we have gradually, since the springtime really, seen an environment where rates have just slowly been increasing. That inevitably has caused lots of withdrawals at various different stages, so it's not just the last 6 weeks where we've seen short notice withdrawals and spikes in volumes. We've seen it over many months now, but I think what clearly the mini budget has done is brought forward, it's created an element of hysteria, understandably so, and clearly we've all had to respond to that.
Cool. I mean, what's great, and I'm sure everyone watching, is that there's still that appetite to lend, and that's great.
Yeah.
So, and I appreciate things have settled a bit, and you've all alluded to that. But we did go through a stage where rates were being pulled last minute, and brokers were getting frustrated. We saw rates pulled on a Monday. A lot of people will understand why, but can someone just expand a little bit why that happened? I mean, why we're in a place where rates were literally being pulled within hours? Andy, I'll come to you. That's right.
Yeah, so I guess it's twofold, really. You know, one was the point that Clive made was that, you know, a lot of rates, because of the volatility in swap rate markets, were very quickly underwater as far as profitability was concerned from a lender perspective. So lenders had to act quickly to remove those products to remain profitable. But then the second element of it was really around being able to continue to service that business that was coming in as well. So the short notice withdrawals is a component of needing to remove those products for profitability, but also we need to not give too much notice, because what we tend to find on those withdrawal days is huge spikes in volumes. And if we've got an operational capacity that is exceeded by 5 times in one day, then inevitably it starts to impact on service for those cases that work their way through the pipeline.
Cool. Rach?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult talking about rate withdrawals, isn't it? I think no lender will ever say that they want to withdraw on short notice. I don't think any of us, that's never a dream scenario, and it's something that we'd take really seriously doing. But those spikes, like Andrew's mentioning, you know, we've seen real, it's things with lenders, with rates and sourcing, that when one lender moves, all of a sudden you can jump from being 10th, 15th on sourcing to top sourcing within an hour. And if you don't have the capacity to pull quickly or to turn off funds, which some lenders can do, it can just leave you really vulnerable to service spikes. And that puts real operational struggles on the business now, but also when they could then come to complete later on down the line. So it's not all about the lenders trying to maximise profits. Sometimes there's a lot more to it than that. But I can imagine from a broker perspective, it's incredibly frustrating, and I don't think any lender would want to do that unless they really had to.
Cool. Robin, anything you'd want to add?
I don't think so. I think that they've pretty much covered it, haven't they? I mean, it obviously started with changes in money market swap rates initially, and that then built up and created the service problem as people started getting caught at the top. And I think early on in the process, but perhaps lenders weren't quite as fleet of foot in terms of changing pricing because it was an environment that we're all used to. But certainly now we are, and you know, as I said, you've got to pull rates at the right time to protect both profitability and service. Yeah.
Add a bit of context to that. We've year to date we've released over 1,100 different mortgage products, and that is way more than we would ever usually. It's equivalent of a reprice just over every 1.3 weeks, and that as a strain on a product team, we've got a team of 8 in our product team. That is a huge amount of work. So I think just even the work that goes on behind the scenes is just phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So Clive, I'll start with you on the next one. In terms of rates, so we have started to see rates, which I know the market is seeing positively, and brokers definitely have, starting to come down a little bit. We're not going to get too excited yet.
No.
But do you think that we're going to see all lenders follow suit? Do you think this is now a trend we're going to see, or are we too early to really predict?
Well, what we have seen is a slowing of demand in the market, and when that happens, you know, as I mentioned, lenders are very well capitalised at the moment. Money's still coming into savings accounts, which is one positive, if you like, in the fact that because interest rates have gone up, deposit rates are more attractive. So people are coming out of equities probably and getting 3 or 4% on their savings. Now, as a building society, that becomes a liability, which means, you know, we need to lend that money out. Okay. So I think we will see more competition, which means that, you know, there'll be strategic products that will price in certain segments, loan to values, where we can still make a good margin, but slightly undercut the market. So it's good. I think that Rachel mentioned product teams. They're going to have their work cut out over the next few weeks because they're all going to be moving around, jostling around, trying to find that position. And I think there will be, you know, times when products look more attractive, but, you know, don't sort of like, you know, pin your hopes on on rates coming down because, as we know, base rates are likely to be rising steadily over the next 6 months.
Okay. Andy?
I guess the other factor in all of this is the, you know, the changes of the Chancellor and the new Prime Minister has had a settling effect on money markets, and as such we've started to see swap rates has softened, which, you know, is a big factor as to why we've seen some of the reductions more recently. I'd also add the point that, you know, some lenders were in a position where they were doing an awful lot of business, you know, in the midst of that mini budget, hysteria that we've seen, and actually they're going to need to catch up on service before they're in a position to potentially reduce rates as well. So there's lots of different factors at play, but it's certainly good to see the markets settling, because that means that the swap rates settle and it's becomes a much more predictable environment for lenders in terms of, you know, the rate environment and needing to do short notice withdrawals and such like.
Okay. In terms of the market, and we've talked a lot about that and the challenges that we've seen, I have heard recently that the saying of we're now moving into that golden age of advice. Where would you put yourself in regard to that, and how would you view it? Is that correct? I mean, Robin?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think at every conference I've been to recently and every panel debate I've listened to, this is a key subject that comes up, and it's fundamentally, it is true, isn't it? The last few years, and certainly this year, as we've gone through a pandemic, we're going through the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, everything that's kind of out of our control as well. Customers are more and more nervous about that. It impacts customer sentiment. We're in a rising interest rate environment, although it might be changing now, which also impacts obviously the level of advice that needs to be given. So customers need comfort. They want to talk to someone. They want to talk about what's going on in the market, what their options are, and the mortgage advisors are absolutely best placed to do that. So I couldn't agree more, and I think that will continue for the foreseeable future.
Okay, Rach.
Yeah, you see that trend, don't you? So go back 5 years and about 75% of the mortgage market was intermediary. That's now just over 81%. And we've actually seen a real growth of that through COVID. Not to bring it up too much. We try and get through a debate without talking about it. But, you know, we've seen people, as people's circumstances have changed, and we're facing into a cost of living crisis at the moment. When people don't know, you know, look at news at the moment, you don't know. I wouldn't want to predict what's happening a week from now. And I think when you factor all of that in, what we do as an industry incredibly well is help people into their homes, help people invest for their future, help people buy to let properties, etc. And I think that when you consider what a large purchase that is, advice is a really fundamental part of that. And I'm really proud of the role that all of us play in bringing that through and continuing to champion that. And I think as lenders, we can really support that evolution of advice by sharing more information and being really transparent about what we're doing, which is why I think debates like this are fantastic.
Andy?
I think the points that are made, you know, I'd echo them. I guess the key point is that complexity in a market, you know, that really is important to go through an advice process. So, you know, whole of market brokers having an understanding of what options are out there available, not just from a product point of view, but from a policy and eligibility and an affordability perspective, you know, is absolutely key in this market. So we're at record levels in terms of intermediary contribution, and I certainly wouldn't anticipate that that's going to change in the short term.
Any final thoughts from you, Clive?
Yeah, I think it's whether it's a golden age or a more complicated age is debatable. But I think, you know, over the last 10 years, we've seen a market that's only been going in one direction. You know, interest rates have been very low. That's changed over a short space of time. So I would say that the job of an advisor is never been more important, and it's going to be a bit more complicated. And I think we're going to see, you know, more changes over time. So, you know, we're not in such a benign market as we used to be. So, yeah, it's never been, I think a lot of people have been saying it's never been a more important time to seek financial advice.
I guess the other point as well, linking it in specifically to new build, is that, you know, that as a market does require a degree of specialism. You know, Help to Buy is no longer there, effectively, which does mean that the options and the creativity that are needed to, you know, fill that void that's been left by Help to Buy with different types of schemes emerging, you know, really play to the value of a broker and that specialism in giving advice as well.
Cool, fantastic. Well, thank you all. That draws to a close part one. In part two, we're going to focus more on new build and affordable housing. Look forward to seeing you all soon.